Welcome in, everyone, to Broadcaster Hour. I'm Roger Hoover, joining you from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. On the far side of the screen, we got Kyle Crooks down in Gainesville, Florida. In the center of the screen from Pittsburgh, PA, Joe Block. And Joe, it's great to have you join us. And we've had a lot of Southern League reunions on this show, but I think this is the first time we've had three broadcasters for the Jacksonville Suns all in one spot. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's that was a neat place. I got to be the broadcaster there when the ballpark opened, which is now almost 20 years old. So I'm the old guy of the bunch. So nice to be along with you guys today.
So Joe, what's your offseason been like? I always wonder, for a baseball broadcaster that grinds it out, it's a little bit different this year. It was a shortened season, only 60 games. But when you have to go through a long grind, how do you try and wind down in an offseason? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, this year there was no winding down, really. It felt like we barely had gotten started. We were having a baby at the time too, so once the season ended, we're getting into family mode again and that kind of thing. But typically speaking, for me, yeah, I think there's what I've kind of found to be beneficial is I've kind of divided the off season typically into thirds, and unofficially it just kind of ends up this way. That first third when we get back is nice weather and just try to get outside. This is not, non-COVID times. Get outside, go out and do things. Maybe travel a little bit locally with my young family, and just spend time with them. And then that second third is the holidays. Typically in typical years we would host Thanksgiving at our house, and we'd have some Christmas get-togethers and things like that. And so and then basically after New Year's was that third, and that's when naturally, for me at least, the juices start to get flowing again. You start to think, okay, we're about 6-7 weeks out, time to get to work. So, and that's where I'm at right now. Right now everything is assumed that we're going to have our first exhibition on the 27th of February. So I've got everything timed kind of leading up to that. So I'm doing basically biographical work on our players, everyone that's going to be in camp. And then I kind of gravitate toward doing some pre-prep for the regular season with other teams and doing some other background stuff. I also do a number of, I try to look at like overall baseball trends, and I'll do that throughout the winter, just on those fall or winter days where I'm missing baseball and I'm curious about something, or if I read a story that piques my interest about a topic, I'll go and look through some things and try to come up with some notes of some things that I might want to work in early on in the season or in spring training or both. So that's kind of how the off season works. I try to take, first 3 months or so and just unwind and spend time with my family, because, in a typical year when we're traveling, I don't see them very much. And I got a young family. The oldest is 5. I got 3 kids, 5 and younger. So, spend a lot of time with them. And then after that, it's just, all right, roll up the sleeves, let's go, get ready for baseball season. So that's usually kind of the mode I'm in right now.
We know how different this season was, and calling those road games remotely and calling games with no fans in the stands. How did you adjust to it? One, calling the action off of monitors, but having to create that juice of a road game when you don't have the crowd or the atmosphere around you, and you're trying to create energy for something that's happening maybe 1,000 miles away.
It was almost harder for us. Well, it's kind of, I don't know, and I think our experience might be a little bit different than some other teams, because our crew, we switch TV and radio. So road TV actually seemed okay sometimes, because we had a very cool studio to work with at AT&T Sportsnet Pittsburgh, and it almost felt like there was an audience, because there was always a camera operator or two on the other side of the studio, is the other half designated for the actual studio. Usually they have the whole thing to play with. They were nice enough kind of give us half of it to have a little work area, but so the guys might be sitting at the desk watching the game too, and we can talk to them between innings, from across the room, and that kind of almost felt a little bit more normal, even though we're not at the ballpark at all. But when we were at the park, having no fans, I mean, you're always looking at empty seats, and it's so unusual, especially on home runs. You'd see that. And there is such a palpable energy whenever there's any decent crowd. I mean, even if there's a few thousand, working in the minor leagues in baseball or in college, especially in college, I don't care if you get 2,000 people or 1,000 people in a gym, a smaller gym in college basketball. It feels like the place is rocking, and that's all that matters really, is just to have that energy. So and everyone's going to snicker who listens to the Pirate games. I'm typically a lower stated guy as it is, so I really have had to struggle with trying to keep that energy up. And this helps. But I think that's part of the equation too. Is we're pros and we're supposed to adjust to all environments. So, but the hardest part of it all wasn't generating the energy. It wasn't even calling a game off a monitor, which was an adjustment, and it is quite imperfect. But I think we were able to manage adequately. But the hardest part about it all was not being around the team and having no pulse at all of what's going on with the team, especially in baseball, because there are so many things that are happening, and our analysts especially are very good. They could be big league managers. I mean, those guys they know the game so well, and they have questions that they want answered. I have things I'm thinking I'm observing or would like to ask about a trend, or just different things that they might be feeling, or they're going to face this guy tonight, or tomorrow night. I want to ask about. There's just so many things that just get totally washed away, that never get asked, never have any idea what's happening. And I found myself being way more critical of the team. And now they finished with the poorest record in baseball, but I try to be fair. And it was really hard to be fair sometimes, because all I'm being able to judge off of is what I'm seeing on a monitor. I'm not even in the ballpark half the time to even, to know, is this guy limping onto the plane? Is that why he's not running a ball out, or he can't move to his right? Things like that. I mean, there's so many things that just fell through the cracks that, I'm watching the NFL games, I'm watching the NBA and the NHL and the college broadcasts now as a fan. I don't notice, because I'm watching for 20 minutes here or an hour here. But if I'm watching a team every night, which I pick a couple teams that I have, I watch the Penguins and I watch the Pistons pretty regularly. I can notice a difference of, the things that the analysts can work in, or even the play-by-play guys can work in. You see so much less of that. And so I think it's noticeable to us. I hope it's not noticeable to our audience, but I think that's what really gets lost, is you can't explain what's taking place. And when you're on a team that's not doing well, you really need to do that to really personify the people. I haven't even met half our team. And so that's where it becomes a worry that, I understand safety protocols. They do need to continue. But beyond that, I don't think this kind of way can continue. I hope that's a short enough answer for you. We have an hour, right?
That's right, yeah. We're filling an hour, yeah. Kind of along those lines with broadcasting in 2020, you mentioned calling games off a monitor. I know for the TV side, probably sticking with looking at the program feed, but when you were calling radio, what did you mainly watch? Did you watch the program monitor? Did you watch the all nine? How'd you kind of get some eye discipline through calling games remotely?
Yeah, so we were set up with three monitors, and the middle one was program, and then we had the all nine in front of the analyst and me. So those were the three, and then we each had a smaller monitor kind of off to my right and to his left, that would have balls and strikes and scoreboard and some other things in case bullpen cameras, so we can kind of see those things kind of in a quad view. So if somebody's getting up in the bullpen and they can't cut to it on the TV broadcast right away, I can see, all right, so-and-so's getting up, or at least I can see somebody's getting up. So it's kind of like, real baseball, you're looking down there like, somebody's getting, I don't know who it is. Somebody's getting up. I'll wait for TV to show it. But in terms of training the eye, I think what I was trying to do was, I was trying to watch the program monitor, watch the pitch come in, because I like to describe where the pitch was, what the pitch was. It also helps me, especially like I just mentioned, there's so little information that we really have other than just watching the games. So I'm going to try to find as much information out during the game as I can. So, all right, Chad Kuhl just threw a curveball, and he missed with it down and in to the right-handed batter. And I know he missed with it because he's not trying to go in there with it. You see the catcher's glove. Plus, that's this hitter's a pull hitter. He can uppercutting swing, yank the ball. So I'm paying attention to that, so I can pique our analyst, that kind of thing. And so then if I see that contact is made, then my eyes are going to go, in this case, to the right on our bank, and I can go over there and see the ball put into play. And then what I would do is before the pitch, I would glance over. Maybe there's a shift. Maybe the shift is shifted. A lot of times with 2 strikes, we'd see the infielders move as well. So see if the outfield swung around. Mention that typically at least once a batter. So that was kind of the pendulum effect that I'd have. Check the defense, watch the pitch come in, go back to the defense. But of course, baseball is unique. You're watching the pitch from center field, and you're watching it leave from behind, in that case behind the plate. So it's such it's a complete opposite of nature. So you have to really think about it, and it wasn't always easy. I couldn't tell a line drive in the infield from a one hopper, and there would be times I'd get caught saying line drive on a hop. So I just realized I got to lay back. And judging home runs not easy as it is normally. So anything that was hit deeply, I just say hit deeply, and I just wait. Okay, it's gone, or oh, it's caught, And so it was really I wasn't able to be on the play nearly as much, but I'm just trying to slow down, try to get it right, dumb it down, and that's how I did it.
Certainly made it work during the 2020 season, and that was your last season, of course, in baseball. You're getting ready for one coming up this year, but what about the spark for you? What made you want to get into broadcasting, and then what took it from just an interest into some steps you took to get on the mic?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just kind of always wanted to do this. I was 4, and I wanted to be a game show host, and I announced that to my family. I'm sure they were real pleased by that. Like, oh, great. All right, that's what you're going to do. Pat me on the head. But no, I really liked game shows and the strategy involved with the game shows, the hosting aspect of, entertaining, informing, kind of helping everybody along, the audience understand what's taking place. So I guess that's probably something I've always innately desired to do. And then I became a baseball fan ardently around age 8. So that's kind of when I switched my career goals. I know I'm very strange, but that was it. I said I was going to be a baseball broadcaster, and so I started practicing at that time into a cassette tape recorder, and doing more hosting the pregame show, my own pregame show, reading the lineups, that kind of thing, and then gravitating toward doing some actual play-by-play when I got older. I think it's really hard at age 8 to have your mind work like that, I think. But when I was about 14 or so, I was starting to really practice that. And then in those days, nowadays you just make a YouTube channel or whatever. But I went to a public access station in Roseville, Michigan. And those guys, Mike Moritz and Gene Barrett and Tom Hughes, he still does camera for the Tigers, FS Detroit. So those guys really helped us out to host a show about Roseville high school sports. And then they would broadcast a few high school football games. So I did a couple high school football games at 15. And, then I'm just like, okay, I like this. This is good. And, I did some more. I would do like our high school basketball video, but I do the play-by-play into it, and the coaches will say, stop doing that. We just want the video. We're not paying you to do play-by-play. But I kept practicing, and in college at Michigan State, they didn't really have student play-by-play but I would do other things. I worked in radio and I worked in television, and then I worked in, which I really strongly suggest, newspaper, and kind of learned how to be a reporter, learned news judgment, learned journalistic integrity. And I think that's helped me so much in this job, because so much of what we do, anytime it's beyond the normal, baseball game, especially in this last year, there's so much that you have to think about. So, and then after college, I went into minor league baseball and, started doing the games. And really, as you guys know, once you do 1 or 2 minor league seasons, if you're cut out to do baseball or not, because it's every day for, in the minors 5 months, in the big leagues 7.5 months, 8.5 if you're lucky. So you really got to love it. And I certainly did. And so luckily enough, I'm still paid to do it. So I get to keep doing it. It's fun.
How much did you learn? That first stop, right, Joe, was Charleston, South Carolina. And I read you went to the winter meetings in '99 after you graduated.
1999.
Is that right? That's correct.
Last
right?
century. Yes.
Yes. I don't want to date you. I don't want to make you feel old. But what was that?
You're not making me feel. Waking up makes me feel old.
But what was that experience like for you? Because I know when a lot of guys and gals graduate, they're kind of scared of the prospects of the industry and going to that first winter meetings and trying to connect with everybody. So how did you handle that and get your first job in the minors?
Yeah, it was out in Anaheim, and I grew up in Michigan, in Detroit, and I was went to school at Michigan State. So Michigan, I never lived anywhere else, and so Anaheim, California is a long way. Went out with a buddy, my roommate, and which was really cool. He ended up getting a job in Lansing, which I thought was hilarious. About you go all the way out there and you get a job with the Lugnuts. I was like, okay, but I didn't know anything about anything really. So 2 guys really helped out. Doug Greenwald, broadcaster for many years, and then Neil Solins, who works now with the Rays, pre and post. Done many years of play-by-play too. Those guys were already a little bit established, and they were there. And I remember both those guys separately, just seeing some wide-eyed kid and saying, "Hey, and I think they're only a couple of years older than me, but at that time it feels like such a chasm to have had a couple of years of minor league experience under their belts." And so they said, "Okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go and you're going to look around and see what jobs you want, and you write your name on the list and wear a suit and check back periodically." And that's how it worked in those days. And if they want you for an interview, they'll put you down and make sure you're there on time and show up with a resume and a smile and have at it, or whatever, But it's like I didn't know what to do. And it's like, yeah, go around, talk to people, get to know people. Okay, great. So I applied for a bunch of jobs, got turned down. I don't know, maybe half of them I didn't even get an interview, and then the other, 4 or 5, I think I got 3 interviews or 2 interviews, or something like that. But Charleston was interesting, and I'm glad I got interviewed there because I noticed that they were owned by Mike Veeck, and anyone that knows about baseball, Bill Veeck, of course, the Hall of Fame owner, and Mike's his son, and I go, well, the apple probably doesn't fall far from the tree. I think this is going to be really cool. And then you go on to learn that Bill Murray is an involved co-owner. And, this is kind of interesting. All right, this would be great. So I sit down, and the guy that's going to interview me is the current broadcaster. And, I'm so fortunate because, look, I mean, I'm talking to 2 guys right now that could be doing what I'm doing just as easily as I could. It's there's so many guys that are so talented and good, just good. And I'm not any more special than any of them. I just have had a lot of breaks, I think, along the way. And so the guy I sit next to is Dave Raymond. Dave Raymond's done the Astros for a million years, and then he's been Rangers TV for a million years, and he's excellent. It could have been anybody doing those games, but it happens to be a guy that was on his way to becoming a big league announcer. So I make a relationship there, and he likes me. So he ends up recommending me to get hired, and I do get hired. But Dave gets a job at Iowa at AAA that he can't pass up. So I never work with Dave. And then the season rolls around, and there was a duo, Jim Lucas and Don Wardlow, who had worked games in the Eastern League and in St. Paul prior. And they worked together because Don was born without eyes and needed somebody to describe the action. And Don was an excellent analyst. He knew the game of baseball very well. And what really taught me about, well, he taught me many things, Don did, but one thing that he taught me was he did so much work, like I was talking earlier about biographical work. So he can't see, so he does, and he's obviously he's played beeper ball, but he's never played the game as it's played out there. So he's got to ask these guys about their lives and questions and colorful things. And so he would talk to everybody and would learn so much about these guys. He would get on the internet and find out a little nugget and then try to expound upon it and tell a story. And it was excellent. And so I've tried to do that all these years is make sure I've got a couple of stories about guys, even in spring training, the 60th guy in camp, he's got a story and there's something interesting. And there might be lots of things that are interesting. So let's find out about them, and if you don't find anything, there's a language barrier with a lot of players. There's an interesting story there. We have translators. I try to find out, what their stories are. The Spanish-speaking players, for instance, too. And Don would try to do the same things. I remember that distinctly. So that's who I worked with. I did pre and post game for Jim and Don's broadcast, which there was nothing like it. There never has been, never will be again. Or maybe there will be again. I hope so. But with Don, I got to work with him for a few games. That was like the carrot that they dangled. You get to do about 8 games of play-by-play. So I worked with Don. So the first, professional baseball games I ever broadcast was with an announcer born without eyes. So that taught me right away, hey, you got to describe the action because your audience can't see and Don can't see and Don can't do his job right if you're not describing the action very well. And I didn't do it very well, and he let me know on the air. And so I was quickly moved to do a better job. And so, he helped me out a lot. So that's the long-winded answer again that you weren't looking for.
This is
you only had to do 4 questions.
Forever. We could make this broadcast for 2 hours if you'd like.
Yeah.
What are some of the things the first few years, Joe, that you're trying to work on in your play-by-play? When you think about kind of the bare bones, what are those things?
Oh boy, wow, that's 20 plus years ago now. Well, first of all, I still think that you always can improve. I mean, I'm working on stuff already right now. I'm okay. Here's what I'm going to think about this year. But yeah, as you get along, hopefully you're polishing. I still do this, just not to the same degree or volume, but I would write to a lot of different broadcasters and decision makers and send my stuff in and get their input. And so they kind of, at first, really told me basically what I needed to work on. I didn't really know. It was just all kind of a mess for first few years there, I think. And then after my first year in Jacksonville, I think, so that was my fourth year in baseball, but really I'd only broadcast for 2 of those years, any regular play-by-play. So at that point I started and I had done some big league games filling in with Elliott Price in Montreal at that point. So I've had a very small taste of what the big leagues are like. And I just started to get a feeling for, all right, now I can kind of understand what I need to be doing. And, I still would solicit for more advice, of course. But those first few years, I mean, I was just trying to get reps and really I didn't even know how to get better. My voice was different. I think this is common with a lot of, first-time broadcasters. You try to put on a voice. You think you need to sound differently. I listen back, and just like, what is that? A very nasally sound to it. I mean, so it's just some basics were not there. Just ways to be more descriptive, more succinct. Crutches that are commonplace, I think. Preparation, dress, I think was something. I didn't take that very seriously at first. Wouldn't shave. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep. I'd drink too much the night before or whatever, just I was 22 or 23 years old, just go out. I was dating a girl at the time. We'd just go out with the players and be out all night. It's like independent ball. You go out with, Winnipeg or whatever, just, all right, it's 5 a.m. Probably should get to bed for the day game the next day. Like you can't do that. You got to prepare a little bit more, preparation, understanding what was required in that department. So I don't claim to have had it figured out from the outset. Very much the opposite. I've had a lot of people help guide me through through this journey, especially early on, because I had all the enthusiasm for it. I just had no idea really how to do it. And so little by little, I kind of figured it out through trial and error.
And after you get to a point in Jacksonville, I know you and I have talked about this before, you get to a point where, yes, you've kind of figured out what minor league baseball is like and how to be a successful minor league broadcaster, but there are things you need to do around the minor league baseball work to make your work stand out and ultimately start moving up in the business. So what were some of those big steps you took ultimately working your way out of minor league baseball to some great opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, broadcasting a minor league baseball game isn't much different than a big league game. I think it's harder in the minors because you have fewer resources. We have all these camera angles and a TV replay all the time, and on the lower levels you may not have game day at and things like that, and so we better game notes and fewer responsibilities. You could just my job is to broadcast a game. My job is not to sell group tickets and bring in this group, all this other stuff that, hey, it helps you as a well-rounded, person in the business. I mean, I like that I have some understanding of all the different fields, but, it does take away from it. So I think it is harder. Now, to differentiate yourself, I think, one of the things I was doing was, trying to create a website. At that time was a little unusual. I don't think everybody had one. Nowadays it's just like, what do you mean a website? What's a web? It's like so archaic sounding. But that was a way for people to be able to quickly access my work. I had a website also that kind of was. It wasn't the first, but I think it was the most comprehensive and put together and widely accepted website with another guy, Jim Tocco, another broadcaster who did fine work. And the two of us, we put this, it was like broadcasting job news. And so everybody can kind of, and conversation on a message board kind of thing. So it was a place to congregate for sports broadcasters. So that helped open some doors for me, but also just kind of get my name out there somewhat. So that was kind of I think something I tell broadcasters today is, you don't have to, it's not enough to just apply for every job. You might get the job, and you might keep advancing that way, but there's so many other things one ought to do. You have to be relentless, I think, because it's super competitive. It's usually a friendly competition, but it's super competitive. It's so subjective. You can be the best and not get the job, or you could be the third best or the seventh best and get the job. So, that's how I felt with. So I'm like, well, I would have picked him, but I'll take it. Thanks. So I just think that's one of the things I've done through the years and continue to do is just network and genuinely get to know people, make friendships, make relationships with people. It's not so much, well, I might need that guy one day, so I'm going to butter him up and then ask him for something. It's like, well, yeah, it may be that, and they kind of understand that if decision makers, other broadcasters, to a degree, sure, of course, but there's a tone that gets established. It's like, hey, we're here to help each other out, and sometimes I'm going to be in a position to help you, sometimes you're going to be in a position to help me, and we just move along and have a good time, getting to do what we like to do. So I think that's the idea is, really scour for jobs, make yourself make yourself opportunities. One of the things that I would do too is, I remember one off season, I didn't have any, this is before I went to Jacksonville, I didn't have anything lined up for baseball the next year. I was doing a little bit of like SoCon basketball, men's basketball, but that was it on TV, and that was it. Like I think 3 games, or maybe in 3 MAC games, I think, and that was it. So I had like 6 games. That's it. That's all I had, and that was going to be it. So I called every Division I men's basketball program, after their seasons were over, like in the early, and I called every minor league team, baseball team, to find opportunities. And there, I did find some jobs that weren't being posted, that weren't available, and that I could apply for. Doesn't mean I got them, but it gave me another opportunity that maybe somebody else, or not as many people had heard of yet, or that kind of thing. So I think if you're just relentless like that, in a good way, in a neighborly way, not in cutthroat, I'm going to get you, I'm going to beat everybody down to the ground. No, but if you're trying to do everything you can to promote yourself, and move along, and create. The other thing I was thinking about is like, so Melanie Newman, I think, is a great example. Melanie now does Orioles games, and Jeff Arnold as well. They just both got hired this past year. Both of them, I've known them for a while now, and Melanie introduced herself in Atlanta one time. Jeff, I'm trying to think where I first met Jeff. Jeff and I have stayed in touch through the years. He's come out here to Pittsburgh. I think he was doing a high school football game one time, and like, hey, I'm going to be in Pittsburgh. Can we have lunch one day? Great, yeah. Melanie came by, said, hey, do you got any time before the game to chat? Yeah, actually, yeah. We sat for about a half hour. She just asked some questions, whatever. I knew of her. I knew of Jeff. I had, I'm aware of these people. They've been in a big league booth. They kind of, and then decision makers, same thing, right? So then when it comes time to make a decision, these aren't just some anonymous names. These are people that you've met before, not just when you're interviewing them, but you've met them before. You've seen them around, you've heard of them, you've talked to them. Now it's a more logical step, even though Jeff, both of them were working in the Carolina League, right? No AA, no AAA. I think Melanie is in her late 20s, Jeff early 30s. So, that's a big step, right? But it didn't feel that way because these are names that you've seen. These are people that you kind of know a little bit. It didn't feel so foreign. It didn't feel like as big of a step as it probably was. So they put themselves, I think, ahead of a lot of other people because of that kind of networking. So those are just some of the examples, I think, of ways that you can put yourself near the front of the line. And I think I'm proof positive of that. I think that kind of work ethic, that kind of dedication and relentlessness put me closer to jobs than a lot of my friends, who I think, and some of whom are distinctly more talented and better, but maybe not at those little aspects. And maybe that put me ahead on some of these jobs. So just being frank about it,
Absolutely, and that led to some great opportunities for you, not only in the NBA with New Orleans, and then ultimately going to the major leagues for baseball. First with the Dodgers with Dodger Talk, then to the Brewers, and then to the Pirates. Just what can you tell us about some of those steps along the way once you finally got your major league opportunities, and then even how you were able to interview and land some of these big jobs?
Yeah, so with Dodger Talk, I worked for KABC in Los Angeles, who at that time was the flagship. And this is an example of what I was just talking about. I never applied for that job. They called me. And I don't have an agent. I should preface everything I'm saying. I've never had an agent. I'm not saying you shouldn't get one. It depends on what you're trying to do. I think an agent can be beneficial for a lot of broadcasters, and for some it does not. In my case, I felt like I could do a lot of the things that agents can do. So I would just do them. So in this case, the Dodgers called me because I had worked, Jacksonville used to be a Dodgers minor league affiliate, and I got to know some people within their organization through those 4 years. And one of whom, Josh Rowich, who's now in Arizona, was in a position to, if not hire, certainly recommend to hire people in broadcasting with the Dodgers. And so he and I had a strong relationship, still do, of course. And so he had a need kind of close to the season, asked me if I'd like to do it. I had just gotten engaged 3 days prior. So I was like, hey, honey, you want to move to LA instead of, New Orleans, like where we're living. So, which made it, that's another story for another day. But so I think some of that work, that groundwork that I had done through the years, I mean, I didn't even have to apply. They called me. And at that time, that was a huge break for me because I was working in New Orleans doing pre and post in the NBA, which is a nice gig. But I ultimately wanted to call Major League Baseball games. So to get to Major League Baseball, I thought was a big deal. To do post game for the Dodgers in the number 2 market, that to me said, okay, if you look at my resume, I've done enough baseball play-by-play in the minors to know how to call a game, and it shows, on the sheet of paper. I've worked in the NBA. I've come back to baseball now, and I'm working in LA. I mean, in theory, I could work anywhere. I can work in any market in Major League Baseball and do play-by-play. Maybe as a number 2, but to come in and do the games. So I said, I got to, this is the opportunity I got to take. So that was something that I think stands out to me to try to relate to you guys, is that if you put in that kind of work, you might get that kind of opportunity too, where you're not applying. Now, what was your question again, Roger? Because I got
yeah.
No. You were asking just how those all came about.
Yeah, and just kind of the string going from what you're able to use your Dodgers opportunity to take into Milwaukee and then ultimately to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, so then Milwaukee, I ended up. So the other point I wanted to make was it doesn't have to be linear, and it almost never is, broadcasting. So Roger, you and I were talking before we came on today. If you, like, for instance, I want to do Major League Baseball play-by-play, it doesn't necessarily mean you work in wooden bat leagues and you work in the minors and you work in A-ball, AA, AAA, and then it almost never works that way. For me, I backed out of baseball, and I did pre and post. I backed out of play-by-play. I did talk in Jacksonville for a year or so. So it's just, you take the opportunities, and I think you try to give potential employers as few reasons to say no as possible. So whatever those opportunities are in front of you, capitalize on them, take them for sure. But you don't have to, get to a certain point. I mean, you look at some guys, they get a job and they have almost no experience doing that, and they can still be very good at it. Or sometimes they fall flat on their faces, but there's no real rhyme or reason to the ascension, is the other point I want to make. Now, from LA to Milwaukee, just like I pointed out, I work here. I should be able to get a Major League play-by-play job, maybe as a number 2, and that's what I ended up doing. But here's 2 things that go on behind the scenes that make it look a lot, it's not seamless. It's not as seamless as it seems, right? I go from LA, the very next year I'm in Milwaukee working with Bob Uecker. Wonderful, wonderful time. But it didn't go as, it looked so smooth, but it wasn't that way. So they switched flagships in LA. I was not going to be brought back to the new flagship station. They already had some personalities in place that they wanted to use, guys that they had under contract for significantly more money. They're going to get the job, right? Okay, so totally understand that. That's the business. So my wife and I, newly married, I think we're a month in, not even a month into being married. We had just moved her out to LA. I'm out of work. Okay. Now luckily she's a very accomplished nurse, nurse practitioner. We were okay for a while, but what are we going to do? We're 3,000 miles away from home here in Pittsburgh. So it turned out that the Twins had an opening. So I'm going to apply for the Twins job. I didn't even get a letter back, an email, nothing. So now that's not to disparage the Twins. They're great. But that just shows you how subjective this business is. In the same offseason, the same resume, the same demo I'm sending out, I send it to the Twins. I'm not even, remotely a consideration. But that's because, in part, I think, I didn't have a strong relationship with anybody in the organization probably because when I worked in St. Paul, I had already worked in that market for 2 years, but I didn't know when I was 23 years old that I should be, really getting to know the people at the Twins, because eventually one day that might benefit me. I just, I'm 23. I didn't get it. I didn't know at the time. So they hired Corey Provis, who was working with Uke in Milwaukee, and he's still there. It's a great hire. He's raising a family there. It's worked out perfectly for him. The Twin Cities are wonderful. My best friend lives there. It's great. So I was a little, disappointed. I was like, I've been great to work in Minnesota. But now the Milwaukee job opens up. Now I did have some contacts with the Brewers, and had for a while. Tyler Barnes, who's still there, a good friend and somebody I've trusted for a lot of years. He was the PR guy in Detroit. I grew up in Detroit for the Tigers in 1998, when I kind of did some, I was kind of an intern for WJR, their flagship at the time, sort of. Dan Dickerson, who was my journalism teacher's husband, who was not yet the play-by-play announcer in Detroit. He was doing sports rap. He invited me to come down and get some sound for his show. And so I'd do that, and Tyler would be the PR guy. He'd sign my media pass, and I'd talk with Tyler. Well, 10, 12 years later, he's giving me an opportunity. So because I've kept that relationship up for a dozen years or so. So Milwaukee does work, but it wasn't after I had been let go, in theory, or just not renewed, however you want to put it, and been turned down for a similar job. So I think that's another lesson to learn is, just like dating, you're going to get know a lot. At least I did. I mean, maybe you guys don't.
Kyle does.
Look at Kyle's the face guy of any group. I mean, look at that beard and the nice hair. You got that pomade hair, or whatever that's called. I don't know what that's called, because I haven't had any of that in 20 years. But yeah, you get a lot of no's. And you got to roll with it and just say, I'm just giving myself chances. Keep rolling it out there, and eventually something's going to stick. And it did. Luckily, that very off season, and it's begun what seems to be a seamless transition for me in baseball.
Let me ask you about working with Uke, and
let me ask you about dating.
Please. You want to use a baseball analogy? I'm batting below the Mendoza line on the dating.
Swing and a miss.
1 out of 5's not bad.
Exactly. But working with Uke, being in the booth with him, and we all know his personality. Is he kind of the same guy off the air as he is on the air? What was that relationship like with you two?
And you talk about the Mendoza line, it really should be the Uker line, because he batted 200 for his career. But Uke is a wonderful friend, and I feel so much for him today with Henry Aaron passing away. Those two, and Phil Niekro a couple weeks ago too. Two longtime friends and teammates of his. I dare not reach out today. I can't think of where he's at right now. But he and I and our wives have stayed in touch all these years. He's a wonderful human being, but he's just as funny as you think he is in person, if not more so, because there's no censors. Unless Judy's sitting behind him, then that's his censor. His wife, that's his censor. But it's the thing I can't even talk about. Just all the different things that are cool about being around him. First of all, him playing the game, and he was a real good catcher too, a really good catcher. Good catchers usually know the game, and he knows the game of baseball fantastically. So sitting next to him, just the things that he picks up on, and just learning about the game, wonderful. Talking about the game between innings, before the game, after the game. Things that I saw and thought I saw, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, we could talk about. So great. But the laughs, obviously, and I know that's what you're getting at, is I don't know if there's anybody in baseball, and there have been few others around, in our lifetimes that have had the quick wit that he does. He is able to find something hilarious about, you don't even know it's coming, and then all of a sudden there's just this punchline that takes place, and where did that come from? And he's a master. And I'm a big fan of comedy, stand-up comedy especially, and I watch anything I can get my hands on, I'll watch them. The Netflix specials and try to really hone in on what they're doing and watch them and just enjoy it. But so natural to him, and it's neat. It's just neat to be around. It's funny. I'll tell a story. So let's see, Milwaukee is like getting close to, like they were in first place. Was it the 2014 season? I think it was 2014. They're in first place for most of the year, but now they're sliding, and we're trying to like hang on and make the postseason, which they ultimately did not. But we're trying to find like a good luck charm. So let's see here. So I'm by my basement bar down here. So this is more for ornamentation than actual consumption, at least at noon. So we get a little of this out. Someone's, so the thing about Uke is he's going to be 87 years old. He's the youngest. I mean, I'm 42. I feel like he was younger than me. Like because he hangs out with the players and like he's a young spirit. He's Mr. Baseball, baseball keeps us young. So he's like, all right, the guys are telling me, this is like, 6-7 years ago, the guys are telling me about Fireball. Now this is not something we would normally do, but he's like, hey, let's take a cap full of this and just, maybe that's our good luck charm and, whatever. And so it was. And like, okay, now it doesn't affect us. We're not like, looped out or something on the broadcast, but it was just a way to like go, all right, we got to shake this up. And it worked. They won that game. So now the next night, and again, just a little cap full, just a little, okay, haha. All right, we do it. But now everybody that's in the room has to do it. So there's people in a room that I don't think have ever had alcohol before or whatever, and it was kind of hilarious. So, I mean, adults, not kids or anything like that. So now this has become a thing. So people will walk in right at the wrong time and go, oh no, is it because it started, they won again. So they kept, oh, did I walk in at the wrong time? And some people would walk in on purpose at the right time. It got to be a big group. I think they won maybe 3 in a row and then they lost. And then that was the end of the tradition. But it was, it's just stuff like that. It's like, him being an ex-player and him being, who he is, just such a special person and personality. Even the low times, and the Brewers have had a lot of low times, in his half century at the mic, he makes it fun. We had a game in Wrigley, one of the poorer years, and the Brewers are getting their hat handed to them, and Kyuji Fujikawa came in to pitch for the Cubs, and Uke starts talking about how we should write this sitcom where Fujikawa stars as he's kind of this like landlord, but like kind of a bad landlord, but he tries to pretend he's a good landlord, and there's like a pizza place, like a pizzeria at the bottom of the apartment building that he runs, and he gives everybody pizza so they think he's a good guy, but really he's like jacking up the rent, and he's like having people sign leases for and it's like this apartment building right behind Wrigley, and he says, yeah, it's a ballpark view, but it's really just like in the wall. Like you can't see into the ballpark, you just see the wall. Like he's developing this sitcom and like a story arc for while Kyuji Fujikawa pitches this like mop-up inning for the Cubs in like an 11-1 game in the 8th inning, and it's all brilliant, and I'm just egging him on more, just trying to inch it along as he brings it another mile, and it's just he has a way to make every day fun, and it's infectious and it's wonderful. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it sounds like he's writing TV shows. Yeah, exactly. Some of that Fireball is gone, though. We'll mention that.
Well, yeah, that was last night, yeah.
Let's get to play-by-play principles for you. How descriptive do you like to get in your call? What do you think is not enough, and what do you think is too much? Because I think there is that line that sometimes you can tiptoe. Sure.
John Miller gave me some really good advice. Punch words, be succinct. And he's excellent. No one's ever, I'm not going to claim that I'm anywhere in that vicinity, but it was good advice. And I've tried to get to somewhere along those lines. When you say not in time, don't just say safe, out. those are, no one says not in time. No one says not in time anywhere. Safe, I understand what I mean. Out, okay, things like that. Now the other side of the coin there is, all right, when you've got some downtime and your analyst is just, you got 162 of these things, maybe he's just maybe he's hungover, maybe he's tired, maybe he's just, the game's boring, he's just not into it, whatever. You got some time on your hands, give us some description, tell us what's going on. Or, maybe it's the beauty of baseball. Donald Hall, the late poet, would talk about how one of his favorite things in baseball was that time of the anticipation, of course, between moments in baseball. And some of them are so mundane and some of them can be, so thrilling. And it's just nothing is happening, but everything is happening. And so sometimes you can really capture the moment by describing. Sometimes it's better to lay out. Sometimes it's better to talk about it, especially, obviously when you're on the radio. The pitcher goes back and takes off his cap, wipes his brow, rubs up the baseball, circles half the mound, gets up there, bends down, nervously, looking in for the sign, put down, here's the pitch, wow, okay, you really feel like you're there now. So there's different times where you might want to do that. Now I've done it and I've heard other guys do it. It's there's 2 outs, there's nobody on. It's a 6-3 game in the 4th inning. Yeah, a 3-hopper onto the backhand side of the shortstop, who plants his right foot, throws over the top onto first base, scooped up on 2 hops by the first baseman, who lunges to his right, and the inning is over. It's like, no, it's just a ground ball to short. The inning's over. It's like, you just move on.
I'm guilty.
Like, that doesn't matter. Just let's move on. Now, if it's something unusual, ground ball onto the backhand to short, you can, work in a little something. It keeps you in rhythm. You're still on top of it, right? Bobbled, recovered, throws on the first, so if you're still on top of the action, and then something unusual happens, that's good. Okay, you don't want to mail in the play either and just go, ground ball to short, and he's out. No, he's not out. No, now you're not on the play either. So that's going too far, I think, the other way. You want to stay on the play, and just tell them what you're seeing, observe it. But you don't need to go overboard with it until there's something unusual. And if there isn't anything unusual, there's no harm in saying, roller on to short, Newman in front of it, picks it up, flips on to first, and the inning is over. Okay, great. That's it. We don't need to use our imaginations. Let's, sell some beer, and pizza, and move on to the next inning. And so I think that's where it can be overkill, but for the most part, just stay on top of the play. Don't bog down your call with too much description. You want to still be on top of the play. And I think, but when you're seeing something that's unusual, you should point it out if you can get to it very quickly. And that takes practice. That takes a lot of reps. That takes years of watching the game and really, you can kind of see, like, for instance, maybe a catcher comes up ready to throw, and you just know when the catcher can't seam up the ball, and it might just be a fraction. It just, like, there's just that double clutch or something, for instance, and you point it out, and throws late. You can't, maybe you can't get to it until afterward, but you're collecting all that data, and you're going to describe what's happening. So, but stay on top of the play. And if you can work in something quickly while you're describing the play, great. But don't get behind the play because you want to throw in, cerulean blue sky overhead today. And miss a pitch or, no, okay. Just let the game work and you work around it.
And of course, in your work with the Pirates, you get to go back and forth between television and radio. Do you like that, first of all? And then when you're on television, kind of what's your approach, making sure you're capturing everything and storytelling in a lot of ways the right way?
Yeah, I think what we do is cool. Because, and then we switch the analysts too. So I'm not working with one analyst. And this year, luckily, we'll be able to work in Matt Capps and Kevin Young too, who we intended to last year. But because of COVID, just did not. Michael McHenry debuted with us last year just for a handful of games, and we'll get to work with him too more, in addition to John Wayner and Bob Walk. So to have 5 different analysts to be on 2 media, I think is great. Now, for the audience and for us, because it keeps us fresh. But I think on the television side, it's just the opposite. Of course, don't tell us everything that we already know. For me, and I've been told that my television style is a little different, and I don't speak as much as a lot of other broadcasters. I don't like to tell you that it's ball 1 and necessarily, and I don't like to say ground ball to short, unless we haven't been talking for a couple of seconds and we're not in the middle of something and something needs to be said there. I'll use that as filler. But I also don't want it to be an ongoing, just what was that, Mystery Theater 3000? It's just like those guys just talking about the movie the whole time and never really, you're missing out on what's taking place. I don't want that either. I want something, it's 2 guys watching a game talking about baseball, talking, about the game, almost always about the game or about baseball. But it doesn't need to be just absolutely on point, exactly what you're seeing all the time, because a routine ground ball to short or a fly ball to the outfield should not interrupt us from the point we are going to make or still trying to expound upon from the previous play, maybe, which was that bobble on the caught stealing, attempt or whatever, and then the guy overslid second base or what, we got something interesting we're still talking about, or maybe we're talking about the starting pitcher and giving you some background on this starting pitcher and something. What's the most important thing? What is the most interesting thing that we can give you? And that's how I do it. I think I'm probably in a minority with that, but on the television side, that's what I like to do. Is I like to utilize my analyst. What is his strength and strengths? Play those up. Keep it relevant to the game at hand, but also don't get jailed by what is immediately happening on the field. The director will show the ground ball and then might get back to some pictures that are describing what we're talking about if we're on a roll with a point that I think the audience would like. So that's usually my litmus test, but I think some producers want you to really stick with exactly what's taking place at all times. Obviously, if it's a very important game, a playoff game, things like that. If I were working as a national announcer, I would stick to the game and only the game. But local broadcast, regular season game, no, I feel like we can talk more big picture stuff, especially with a team that's not doing well. You kind of want to get away from being down 7-2 in the 5th.
Right. And then what can you tell us about your preparation? Say if it's a Friday night game between the start of the series between the Pirates and the Cubs, and let's think pre-COVID times as well. Just how do you organize all your prep using your Microsoft OneNote, which I know has been big for you throughout the years, and then how do you organize your scorebook for calling the game?
Yeah, I still use OneNote. I find it to be really useful.
Same here.
I think other people have used Evernote and I don't know what it is, but some sort of fashion, or Word or Excel or but I like it because you can write your notes in, and obviously it syncs, and we're familiar with the cloud now. But when I started using it in 2012, that cloud theory was like, oh wow, it's like I could be at the batting cage and it goes in there and it's on my computer upstairs, and wow, so that's useful. But beginning of the series, I think the only difference for me is beginning of the series. I want to make sure that I'm in the visiting clubhouse at the first game of the series, because there's going to be and hear the manager talk, the opposing team's manager. I want to make sure at least I might do that again, especially if I didn't get to that player and I didn't get to that player that first game. I'll go back and try to make sure I can talk to somebody. But there are questions I want to have answered, or just people I want to just say hi to, ex Pirates or Brewers and Dodgers or Great Falls White Sox and Billings Mustangs and Jacksonville. Those guys are retired now. But there's reason to kind of really know what the other team's doing when the series begins. And I really want to be able to say, like, if we're playing the Reds, Sonny Gray is, let's say, going to pitch the second game of the series. and I noticed something with Sonny Gray, like, maybe he's throwing the slider more than the curveball, and he was always known as a curveball guy. Okay, why the slider more? And I didn't see it anywhere in recent stories written on the Reds. The Reds beat people. Maybe it's an old story to them and to Cincinnati fans, but I just didn't catch it, and I'd like to know, or I'd like to hear Sonny talk about it. So maybe I'll pull Sonny over the day before he starts, so that the next night I've got a little idea. Hey, he struck him out on a slider right there. He's going to that more because he likes whatever. He likes that he can throw that for a strike more often than the curveball. Or he doesn't get called strikes on the curveball as much as the slider, whatever. But that's the idea. Is I want to be able to tell you, the audience, I want to tell you why something is, not guess. Who am I? I didn't play anywhere. Now our analysts might know these things or could make an educated guess. I'd like to tell you exactly why something is, if I can. I can never cover everything, but the more questions I naturally have, I'm naturally curious, the more questions I have, I would think the audience might have as well. I want to try to get as many of those answered before the series, especially from the other team, as possible, and then bring that to the audience.
Final one, Joe. For somebody who has really gone through the gamut of minor league markets and years of minor league seasons, for those that are doing it right now and don't really see the positive and sticking with it and realizing their dream, for somebody who has made it to the big leagues, what's your advice to them to try and stick with it and trust their process?
Kyle, you had to say years and years, right? Years and years and years. Years and years. Years and years. When you get to middle age, it's such an awkward time because you're like, well, I used to be young, but I'm not young anymore, and I'm not old.
You're young.
I'm in between. So you start to go, okay, yeah, that's a little different. Yeah, I think, and I you know what? I have buddies that doing AAA games. They got good jobs. They got good, good setups. They're good. They're big league. They're more than big league ready. They're big league qualified. I think the difference is the want to. How cliche is that? But I really do. I think a lot of times, at least I'm thinking of a couple of friends specifically to me, that's what holds them back. And they've been in it a long time. Now there's other guys that I know not as well. Maybe guys that have worked in AAA that they've got the want to. They are networking. They're doing everything right. They're even talented enough. They're qualified. They've networked. They've done everything right, and they still have not gotten the breakthrough. They've been interviewed. They've been right there. They don't have DUIs or like some skeleton in a closet or, no. It's like they're doing everything right and they still don't have the job. So the advice is you just, if you want the job, eventually you just got to keep going for it. That's your only option. If you quit, you don't have a choice anymore. You will not get the job. So you just got to keep going. Now I got lucky that, I got hired when I did at different places, and my wife's from Pittsburgh. This is where we wanted to end up, and we were very happy in Milwaukee and would have stayed there forever. But this job happened to open up just as we were having our first child. You can't write a script better than that. You can't. So all of our kids born here. We were married here. My wife grew up here. It's a perfect scenario. And I'm a quicker drive to Detroit than anywhere I've ever worked before. So. It works out perfect for us. That doesn't always work that way. And we would have been happy with any big league job, but it just so happens it was a fairy tale for us. But, the suggestion is you just got to keep going because, as good as this outcome has been, let's say for me personally, there have been, 100 times I've been turned down for a job. I've been interviewed. I thought I got something. I thought it was going to be the perfect scenario, and it didn't work out. Maybe something else worked out. Maybe nothing worked out. And I got turned in a completely different direction. There's a lot of chances I've taken that, somehow have worked out. And they don't always work out. And sometimes it takes longer. You look at, let's say, Terry Smith, with the Angels. I think he was in his 40s. I know he was at least, he might have been close to 50, but I think he was in his 40s. But he had done AAA ball for about 20 years. Can't tell me he wasn't qualified. But for whatever reason, it's a subjective industry. When he had interviewed for a job, maybe that person said, well, we want somebody, okay, we want this person instead, what have you. But then he got a job, and now he's been there for 20 years, right? Or close to it, right? So, I think he's been there 20 years now. So that happens. That happens as frequently as, and then there are exceptions. Then on the other side of things, there's the guys like Joe Davis, who I've known since he was 19, and Joe is once in a generation talent. Okay, Adam Amin is a fantastic talent. Wayne Randazzo has made his way to the number one market as a play-by-play announcer. All very early in their careers. And those guys, I remember them asking me for advice. I said, well, what are you asking me for? You guys are going to just do whatever you want. You're going to be fine. Be good people. That's my only advice. You're fine. Joe's tape at 19, he's the Beloit College quarterback. I got his tape. I was like, this is big league ready now. I have no advice for you. I really don't. Just, interview well and, don't do anything dumb. That was it. I really had no advice for him. So there are those guys too. But for the rest of us that have to work, they're not. They work too, but you know what I'm saying. They're just so good that you got to be patient. And I've had to be patient to a degree, but I got a lot of fortunate breaks at really good times. Some people have not gotten those breaks yet. They will. If you keep working at it, and if not, be happy with where you're at too. Not satisfied, but be happy, because I was always happy everywhere I was working. I'm happy where I'm working now, and it's a fun job. So I think, you have to think about it that way so you don't get sour and you don't get tired of certain things too. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to just give you something to fill your show with, but I don't have all the answers.
Well, you filled it up well now that we're at the 1 hour, 8 minute mark. But, Joe, we've enjoyed every bit of it. Just thank you for all the advice, and the story of your career, I think, applies to so many people that are grinding it out in this business. So just thank you for the insights, and we look forward to hearing you call Pirates games very soon.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be on schedule this year, and I hope everyone stays safe out there, and just let's get over the hump here and get through this year and healthy and happy. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Our thanks to Joe Block of the Pirates, and thank all of you for watching this edition of Broadcaster Hour.